Great to have everybody here for Sunday Morning Zen, the program of the Zen Life and Meditation Center. And sincerely appreciate your support. It makes programs like Sunday Morning Zen and Commit to Sit and all the classes and offerings and retreats we do here possible. And so while you're thinking about it, if you're not already a member, we'd appreciate it if you'd head over to the website and join hands with us, become a member of ZLMC. It makes programs like this possible, and it's sincerely appreciated. This morning's speaker, I don't even know where to start. Kelly Junmei Good is Vice President of the Board of Directors for Zen Life and Meditation Center. She's also the steward of the Women's Circle, the Knitting Circle, the NVC Circle. I think I have them, right? And she serves on the executive board and meets regularly here at the Zen Center to keep us on the straight and narrow path and serving people. And we sincerely appreciate it. She holds master's degrees in education, psychology, and aren't you working on right now as well?
Business management degree, and I'm working on one in counseling and spiritual.
There we go. This is why I don't have one. She actually took all the degrees already. So it's wonderful to have her here this morning with us. And while she's getting mic'd up right now, and she's going to have a talk, do a talk this morning on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. I apologize to the people who read the newsletter. I put it in as the 4 pillars of mindfulness. It's actually the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Thank you, Junmei. Looking forward to this morning's talk.
Thank you, Shikan. And thank you, all of you, for being here this morning. It's so good to see so many of your smiling faces online and here in person. It's wonderful to see you all. I can't say I know anything about the 4 pillars, but I am, I'm just kidding. I am talking about the 4 foundations of mindfulness today. So as a Zen teacher in training and as a practitioner, I'm still integrating these 4 foundations of mindfulness into my practice and my daily life. So I wanted to share some of this work that I've done with all of you. So thank you for letting me walk through this out loud in your company this morning. I hope this encounter provides a space for all of us to contemplate these really beautiful teachings together and maybe even deepen our individual and collective understandings. So I'm going to pause at the end of each of the 4 foundations as I move through them for your thoughts or questions, but feel free to share whatever comes up for you as we move through them. So I feel like in this time of transition and uncertainty, maybe it's always a time of transition and uncertainty, but particularly now with the war in Ukraine, humanitarian crises, the pandemic that's still impacting our lives, global environmental crises, it brought me to want to go back to fundamental teachings from Buddha to try to keep it simple and focus on the 4 foundations and just apply it to my practice. Because Buddha taught us about suffering and the cessation of suffering, the 4 foundations really help us to work on our conditioning, on our direct path to realization and awakening. And it gives us a map to follow as we progress over the months and years of deepening into the subtleties of the teachings as we move along together on this spiritual journey. So let me start with, what is a spiritual journey that the 4 foundations of mindfulness will help map out for us? Well, at the start, it's important to start to clarify our intentions. As Shikan spoke about during session, I was able to listen to that talk, is to clarify our sacred intentions and to show up. What is most important to you in your life right now, today? Bring that with you and live that intention and embody it and bring it along with you on this spiritual journey. As to what the journey is, Roshi has said that the journey is really not to answer our questions, but to question our answers. So to question our conditioning and to be mindful is a way of waking up. In our teacher training, our working definition of mindfulness is a systematic look at our belief systems that steadily remove our conditioned layers that are built up by our consensual reality. So I can say that one more time. It's a systematic look at our belief systems that steadily remove our conditioned layers that are built up by our consensual reality. And Buddha encourages us to investigate reality. We need to value reality. If we do not value it, then we live a life of delusion and life will be a conflict. There's a path to enlightenment, which is uncovering our own delusions that prevent us from seeing reality as it really is. Many people don't want to uncover our delusions because it's unsettling and it's disruptive to our sense of security that we have established with our habitual patterns in life. So to look deeper into our practice of mindfulness is to uncover our conditioning that has come from our materialistic culture, where really everything is objects, including ourselves. And this is what shapes our ego and the identity that we have held on so strongly to. We have been told by others that we are in a world of form, and from a very young age, we've been told we are a form, and we've been told how the world should be, and these ideas become unconscious constructs. But we can see more clearly, and the deepest wellness is really seeing reality as it is. I think the 4 foundations help move us in this direction, being clear on what is right now, right in front of us. We also cannot be well on our own. It's all in connection with one another, which is why we practice together. So this is the spiritual path, and we'll see the 4 foundations as a map of practice that leads us to awakening, and I'll go through these here. So I'm taking the 4 foundations from the Satipatthana Sutta, and I'm going to look at it a more concrete or higher level view, and then we can get deeper into discussion together if we so choose. Again, I'll pause at the end of each one for thoughts or questions or comments that come up for you. So we have the 4 foundations, which are the foundation of body, the foundation of feeling tones, the foundations of mind, and then the foundations of Dhamma or Dharma. I know the heading, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, kind of sounds like the concrete foundation of a house or the sturdy structure you would build your spiritual practice on. But it can be translated from the Pali to mean more like the establishment of mindfulness, or more like a verb. And although it doesn't really have a method or process to follow, there's plenty to unpack in the 4 foundations that I've incorporated and continue to try to incorporate into my practice. So I will say the first 2 foundations deal mostly with form and objects and how we understand our world. And then the last 2 foundations move into more of the formless, a way of abiding in what is unchanging and always here. So first we'll start with foundation of body. So this is where we deal with our confusion of form and formless. In this first foundation, we take up our body as a base camp. We commit to our practice. And this is not an intellectual exercise. It is said this is like body in the body. It's very much a direct experience. So from here, we can see body as form, but we come to understand that any thoughts or ideologies can be seen as forms as well. As I said, we are a culture of forms and material objects, and we are told that we are form, so this is our stepping off point in this sutra in our practice. So with the body, we begin with the breath. We focus on the breath in meditation as it flows in and out of the body through our nostrils, our chest, abdomen. We know that meditation is not just a breathing exercise. This is where we cultivate focused concentration and mindfulness. Focusing on the breath helps us create a safe home base where we keep returning to. When we pay attention to our breath, we see that it's comprised of three minor moments: the arising moment of the breath, the living or enduring moment, and then the passing away moment. And we come to see the same is true of all impermanence and all things that exist. In the foundations of the body, it's also discussed the posture. And there are 4 postures that are noted in this sutra. And although we might spend the majority of our time in sitting posture, I know I do, none is preferred posture over the other. So we have the sitting posture, standing, walking, and laying down. There is a story of how Ananda practiced the 4 foundations with such pure and sharp focus that he reached enlightenment as he lifted his foot to lie down. So all postures, when practiced, can assist us in waking up. In this foundation, then there's also the discussion, we move on to the understanding of body parts. So the focus here is on 32 parts of the body, and there's great detail. Body hair, nails, teeth, skin. There's also the flesh, organs, intestines, feces, brain, as well as all the water elements or fluids such as urine, tears, blood, sweat, bile, mucus. Taking apart the body in this way and contemplating on it this way helps us recognize that these body parts as a whole is impermanent. The body is impermanent. Because my body is subject to growth, disease, decay, and death, the body cannot cause lasting satisfaction. This assists us in seeing the body as an object that we are trying to beautify and always trying to prove in our attractiveness. It's not the way. Our culture makes really big money off of the beauty industry, and here in this first foundation, we see it for what it is. It's flesh and bones and organs. The final piece of the first foundation is the practice of awareness of death. Aging and death are our birthday gifts, as the text, The 4 Foundations of Mindfulness in plain English tell us. This book offered a short saying as well from Buddha as a reflection on death. I, who am dying moment after moment, can die in the blink of an eye. Our culture tends to look away from death and end of life, and end of life matters are even becoming seemingly more and more complicated in our society. I know many of our teachers, some of them online here from the teacher training, have read the book Being Mortal by Gandhi, which offers really a lot more than what I can provide here, but it was a great speak on the intersection of end of life, our culture, current medicine, and health professionals, and how that has evolved with modern medicine. But as a culture, though, I know we prefer beginnings as opposed to endings. And as we were studying this teaching last year, I had the opportunity for contemplation on death. So I have a flat porch top on my roof, which is right outside my bedroom window, and I had a robin that fell there and died. And at the time, I immediately thought, I'm gonna get my husband in here, he's gonna climb out that window and he's gonna scoop the bird off. But then I reflected for a moment and said, I can contemplate death, I can stay with this. And I didn't have it removed, and I left it there. It's been there almost a year now, and every morning I've been able to get up and through all the seasons, all the weather, see that bird as it's been changing in its ever forms of death. It's like toothpicks now and some fluff stuck to the shingles. But I get to be reminded again that every morning that death is a part of life. And here again with this first foundation of death and body and the impermanence of body, and it invites us to look more closely at this form and impermanence of form. So that's what I have for foundation 1 of body. I will move on to then the second piece, which is this more active discernment space. It is the foundation of emotional tones. So I've really been digging into this one, and this foundation helps cultivate a balanced sensitivity or equanimity of emotional states. This foundation creates the internal environment where we are able to stay present to the full range of internal sensations and feelings without the impulsive reactions. So hopefully we can end up with an appropriate response in whatever situation we may encounter. Working with this, I've found I am developing maybe even like a fuller or more intimate experience of feeling tones when they are not obstructed by my conditioned reactions or the more like up in my head kind of story. So here is a way in this foundation that it is kept so beautifully simple, and it does this with only identifying feeling or emotional tones as pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So I know I meant to double check it, but I'm pretty sure we have somewhere around 236 English words to describe emotions and emotional states. So for a time with a psychology background, I thought being more and more clear with what my emotional state was that I was experiencing was be more mindful or more focused. But for me, I found that it became exhausting and it became more of an intellectual exercise. So when I was able to pivot to pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, I actually found it really freeing. I do want to say, I do find more detailed understanding and vocabulary around our emotions are helpful for communicating with others when we choose to, but for this practice, all the detailed language was not helpful for me. In the sutra here, I think it's important to note that in both Pali and Sanskrit, the word feeling in this sutra includes both the physical sensations and the mental emotions that are created internally. So with this teaching and with that understanding of feeling in mind, I was able to get closer to the physical sensation from where these emotional tones arise, almost like the pre-emotion, like the moment before I even solidify what it is the emotion might be it positive, negative, or neutral, which then ultimately gave me more agency in how I choose to attend to that emotion or not, as like when we follow the breath, the emotion rises, peaks, and goes away, depending on the conditions around me. Often all that's needed from me is labeling a negative emotion or cool boredom, and then I can focus on the breath for a minute or two and can move on with my day with more equanimity. Another piece that I found interesting was neutral feeling tones. And they are described as neither positive or negative, but I feel like in our culture where we must always be interesting and must always be doing something and filling gaps that come up in our lives, I find that those neutral tones can take on a negative feeling tone for me after some time, and it doesn't always take a very long time. I can remember as a middle school teacher, we would have training institute days, and this was even over some 10 years ago, and really we had a whole episode or a whole training session on just how to not let our students get bored and how to make learning entertaining and fun. So I know this is a standing concept we have in our culture and one that I sit with. So maybe there is an argument to be made for widening our tolerance for neutral experiences as individuals or as a society. But for now, in the second foundation, we can focus just on discerning that neutral feeling tone and watching it fade away. I think also concepts in here include those feelings of aches and pains. And I think these are interesting and deserve mention when talking about these negative feeling tones as well. My sitting took on a time where I had nagging minor discomforts that would arise, and I would engage in more and more micro adjustments, and once I realized this was building into a distraction, it took the guidance of my teacher to just help me sit with the sensations and keep still through the discomfort and see what happens. When I did that, I began to see more clearly that the discomfort, in addition to be constantly changing, really just moving around the body, was really just physical sensations with negative feeling tones and some aversion mixed into it, right? Like I wasn't enjoying it and wanted it to go away. And once I realized that, I was able to come back to calm abiding, and that was really enlightening for me to move through that. So the last piece I'd like to share on this second foundation is that I think it's also good to note that the pain, sadness, or other unpleasant sensations and emotions are not the only feelings that cause suffering. Pleasurable feelings like desire, clinging, attachment also cause suffering. And when in this state, or when in these states of, it's like sleeping, and when we are free from clinging and free from desire, then the whole world can continue to change and we no longer suffer. So I have a poem here that I think touches on this a little bit, and I would like to share it with all of you. It's from a podcast, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a podcast with Roshi Joan Halifax, and this poem is by Jimmy Santiago Baca. I don't know if you're familiar with this, and it's called Who Understands Me But Me? They turn the water off, so I live without water. They build walls higher, so I live without treetops. They paint the windows black, so I live without sunshine. They lock my cage, so I live without going anywhere. They take each last tear I have, I live without tears. They take my heart and rip it open, I live without heart. They take my life and crush it, so I live without a future. They say I'm beastly and fiendish, so I have no friends. They stop up each hope, so I have no passage out of hell. They give me pain, so I live with pain. They give me hate, so I live with hate. They have changed me, and I'm not the same man. They give me no shower, so I live with my smell. They separate me from my brothers, so I live without brothers. Who understands me when I say this is beautiful? Who understands me when I say I have found other freedoms? I cannot fly or make something appear in my hand. I cannot make the heavens open or the earth tremble. I can live with myself, and I am amazed at myself, my love, my beauty. I am taken by my failures, astounded by my fears. I am stubborn and childish. In the midst of this wreckage of life they incurred, I practice being myself, and I have found parts of myself never dreamed of by me. They were goaded out from under rocks in my heart, when the walls were built higher, when the water was turned off and the windows painted black. I followed these signs like an old tracker and followed the tracks deep into myself, followed the blood-spotted path deeper into dangerous regions and founded so many parts of myself, who taught me water is not everything and gave me new eyes to see through walls. And when they spoke, sunlight came out of their mouths. And I was laughing at them, at me with them. We laughed like children and made pacts to always be loyal. Who understands me when I say this is beautiful? So that's what I have there for the second foundation. If we have any comments or thoughts or questions on that one. Okay. Then I have here the foundation of mind, where we're now starting to step off into the formless. And the foundation of mind is this more passive discernment. In this third foundation, we can observe states and qualities of awareness without being compelled by them or needing to suppress them either. So similarly, how in the second foundation, we learn not to cling or avoid more physical or emotional sensations. In the third foundation here, we cultivate this deconditioning of the conditioned automatic reactions we have, so to speak. So at this point in our practice, we are trying to turn everything back in on ourselves. And all of the working too hard we've been doing with too much energy or effort, it just starts to get in the way of our awareness. We begin to see that we are actually getting in our own way. So we need the initial motivation and intention and practicing like your hair is on fire. But as we move into this third foundation, we just need to try to get out of the way. Here's where in our spiritual journey, we're able to look back at our mind, at the mind, but really without the watcher anymore to even watch. So it's really like a surrendering now. It's trying to surrender the will of our compulsions or our need to control, because now we experience that which has nothing to do with all of these forms and conventional reality we were speaking to, because it's all just whole. It's always been here, and it's what is sacred. The world is perfect as it is. So the mind can only know things, but this is an intellect. It's not a knowing. So when we have these intellectual stories about who we are no longer really open to reality as it is. We are then really picking and choosing our experiences to fit that own reality that we've created for ourselves in our mind. We're trying to fit that story. Our ego wants to protect that story, and we tell ourselves about our lives. And when there is a knowing, there is already that separation. So we can't be both a participant and an observer of our life without splitting ourselves. When the struggle stops, then we can see the world is perfect. And I ask myself this quite a bit. Does this really need to be a struggle? So awareness has nothing to do with thinking. We are moving past that to the mind before it knows. And it is unconditional, like the Dharma is unconditional. And this is the heart of awakening. This awareness is not impermanent. Awareness is nothing to do with these constructs we create like time and space. Buddha says to surrender to formless awareness, and this is what we attempt to do in our practice. And we call it by many names: nirvana, emptiness, enlightenment, the formless awareness, Kensho, big mind, the unconditional. But Buddha says we are to surrender to that. So at this point, I do have one more poem that I really think speaks to from our idea of ourselves that we present to others and what we believe ourselves to be. As soon as we identify these, as soon as we've identified and solidified these ideas of who we are, we've created a limitation for ourselves. So it's like pouring our clay selves into a mold and then wondering why we feel so constricted. I think this is from poet Wisława Szymborska, and it's from Joseph Goldstein's book. It was in his book on mindfulness, Practical Guide to Awakening. And this poem kind of speaks to these limitations of our conventional world of perception. And it's called A View with a Grain of Sand. We call it a grain of sand, but it calls itself neither grain nor sand. It does just fine without a name, whether general, particular, permanent, passing, incorrect, or apt. Our glance, our touch means nothing to it. It doesn't feel itself seen and touched, and that it fell on the windowsill is only our experience, not its. For it is not different from falling on anything else, with no assurance that it has finished falling or that it is falling still. The window has a wonderful view of the lake, but the view doesn't view itself. It exists in the world, colorless, shapeless, soundless, odorless, and painless. The lake's floor exists floorlessly. The lake's shore exists shorelessly. The water feels itself neither wet nor dry, and its waves to themselves are neither singular nor plural. They splash deaf to their own noise on pebbles neither large nor small. And all this beneath the sky by nature skyless, in which the sun sets without setting at all, and hides without hiding behind an unminding cloud. The ruffles, it only reason being that it blows. A second passes, a second, a third, but there are only 3 seconds for us. Time has passed like a courier with urgent news, but that's just our simile. The character is invented, his haste is make-believe, his news inhuman. So as I said before, we just need to jump into it and do it, this practice. So to hold our intention in the spiritual path and just to show up And hopefully with the right effort, we'll move from doing meditation to meditation doing us, so to speak. And that'll take us into the big piece of our last foundation, number 4. Any thoughts or comments before number 4? Okay. So we have the 4th foundation, the foundation of Dharma or Dhamma, and this is our realm of abiding. So I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this one, but I'm going to try to point you where I think this sutra is going, so hang in there with me. And this is where I could use anyone else, any priests online or anyone else's work or thoughts on this, because I know I'm not the only one who's been studying this. So we're moving here in the 4th foundation, moving back from formless, and then we're going to integrate this formless back into form. So it's kind of a marrying here. This is a kind of a functional, daily, spiritual Zen path now here in this 4th foundation. We had a Friday with Roshi where Roshi talked about, described this, I believe, as first there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, and then there is mountain again. So this is the piece where we're back at, there's a mountain again. So as Roshi also described it there, we are in the world, but not of it any longer. We're in the world without the same kind of attachments, hopefully not the same kind of graspings. And this is the foundation where we try to stay in it, as it's the realm of abiding, and try not to slip back. But again, it's not a conceptual understanding, it's an experience. This is where we then take up our bodhisattva vow to come back with love and compassion, to be of service to all sentient beings. In this foundation, we can now also see wholesome and unwholesome mental factors. So in the book, The 4 Foundations of Mindfulness, it was described that Buddha had divided thoughts into 2 categories of wholesome and unwholesome. And when he saw that unwholesome thoughts were not suitable for achieving his goal of liberation, he abandoned them. And when he saw that wholesome thoughts were suitable for achieving this goal, he then cultivated them. And that's what we try to do here. So we can balance the 5 hindrances that move us out of this realm of abiding. And those 5 hindrances are the desire, aversion, like slothness or laziness, restlessness and doubt. With those then 7 factors of enlightenment, we can balance them with, which would be the mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, relaxation, samadhi, and equanimity. Here in this space is where we're continuing to practice sitting, and we're practicing our shamatha, our one-pointed attention, along with our open awareness meditation, and even shikantaza, which is known as that silent illumination, where no one is sitting and the whole world is sitting as well. So before I open it up for comments or conversation, I'd like to leave with a quote from Kangurul Rinpoche, a little inspiration. So, the potential for realization is universal and present for all of us. True benefit will come from your own efforts in realization. For your efforts to bring benefit, you must take your life into your own hands and examine your mind and experience. From this point of view, nobody could be kinder to you than yourself. Nobody could have a greater effect on you or actually do more for you than yourself. The Buddha said, I have shown you the path of liberation. Now liberation depends on you. And this is really true. If you don't take your life into your own hands, Not even the Buddhas can make a difference. It's up to you. So thank you for taking that walk with me. I'll open it now to comments, questions, clarifications, possibly from Roshi, whichever anyone may have at this point.
That was pretty clear already. Thank you, Junmei. That was wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's good to see all of you.
Kelly, thank you so much. I thought that was really a wonderful presentation. And I particularly liked your example of the bird. I thought that was really brought that home when you were talking about that foundation. And also, Jimmy Santiago Baca was in prison
Yes.
for a period of time. And so his that poem was very powerful, I thought. So thank you. I think you put so much thought into what you presented this morning, and it was excellent. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Robin. Yeah, that bird up on that was my first step at recognizing a definite habitual pattern of like, ew, get it out of here. It's dirty on my house. And I was like, no, I don't have to see it that way. And I can live with death too and have that part of my experience. I will say, yeah, Jimmy Santiago, thank you for mentioning that. He was in prison, and in that time when he was there, he taught himself how to read and write. So he learned that during like a 5-year stay and came out to just create such beautiful, powerful work, like just so moving to me. For zooming out.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kelly. That was really wonderful. That third foundation is always so hard to talk about because you're talking about formlessness. How do you talk about that? But you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Very good teachers. I hear it again and again.
Oh, one more thing. That second foundation is really great about sensations.
Yeah.
Because we have a dance in hula, ku kani loko, which means to anchor the cry within. Oops, sorry about this. Sorry. Okay. Which means to anchor the cry within. So that means for us, when strong emotions arise, we're really working with it within. We're really not so much trying to project it out, but really holding it here in our hearts, in our bodies, just bearing witness with it, anchoring the cry within, really working, pausing, breathing.
Yeah.
And that, working, that personally working on your emotions, because it's you. Right, so yeah, so I really love that hula when we dance it, and I always think about that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it is about this very sacred place on the island of Oahu, where the royal women would give birth, right? And so there's these huge birthing stones there, and you can imagine. Well, I mean, I've never had children, but you can imagine the physical pain, and they're really working with that. It's very powerful. And the stones there, the earth is supporting them. And they say that, like Buddha touched the earth, right? It's my witness. So that all of that pain is kind of transformed by that relationship to the earth.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, that piece was really interesting for me. Like, I'm still working with it, of course, but just that whole, like, getting to the pre-emotion state almost, or really grounding in that base camp of your body, and what a difference that makes to not have that intellectual experience of even trying to cut out the story, but then trying to cut out even needing to label what that sensation or emotion is. I feel like is what you're kind of speaking to, like just fully grounding yourself and then connecting with the earth in that way for support. Yeah, it's very powerful. I feel like we should all have tea now or something. It's so good to see everyone all lined up on the screen.
One of the things I like about this teaching from the Buddha is it's so comprehensive, and there's so many ways you could teach it depending on your audience. So one of the ways that I think is very useful right now is just to, if you just did the first foundation with just breathing, it could be a good teaching for people. And if people are feeling scared or they're not feeling safe, you could just do breathing exercises, breathing in loving kindness and soothing the body and then letting go. And that could be the whole practice right there, depending on who you're teaching it to. So it was very comprehensive when we try to teach this, all four of them. But you could just take any one, right? And it could be a whole practice unto itself. It's very rich teaching, and I thought you did a wonderful job, thoughtful job, Kelly, just bringing it together this morning. I'm so grateful for your talk this morning. Thank you.
I thought I bit off more than I can chew, but kind of
You did, but you
fit it in somehow.
Thank you, Junmei. That was wonderful.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.